community, I want it to be that questions are okay, because sometimes in a very strict faith system, there is no room for questions. And so you are blindly following, you're blindly following, but you don't really have the heart and the security in that relationship. If I had a relationship with someone and I never had questions for them, or I never had discussions with them about, who they are, where they come from, why they think the way they do, that relationship would seem dull to me. It would seem inauthentic. It wouldn't seem pure. But in a relationship where I'm saying, hey, maybe I don't understand this about you. Can you show me or share with me? I feel like there might be some more quality and depth in that relationship. So in some of these cases where it's like you don't question God, or you got to be in and all, maybe, just like we see in the beginning of Genesis, the relationship is about questions. Okay, friends, it's going to be a great time today because we're going to play a game. I love games. When they have that question about what would you do for your life if you weren't paid for it, it would be playing games. I used to go to game nights with a group of people, lovely people, and we would giggle, people would be competitive, and it would be amazing because I like to see people experience all the things when we're playing games. But at the end, for some reason, it happened almost every time, I would have a thoughtful question, okay? And it would lead to another discussion that would last another hour or two, and fun, okay? I could do that for my life without any money. And so this is why I'm doing it on YouTube. I haven't got much traction on my game videos yet, but I'm hoping that changes, okay? I'm hoping that changes with my mindset, right? But I want to make sure that these games are easy to digest and understand. And today's game is going to be for those who are writers, those who are creative thinkers, those who are thoughtful and want to engage in conversation. So I'm going to share with you the scripture that inspires today's game, and then we're going to get all the way into it, okay? So this game is inspired by 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 19, where it says, "For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. For it is written, he taketh the wise in their own craftiness." Now, one day I was living in my life, sitting in a chair in America, and I was thinking to myself, is it foolish for me to believe in the word of God? Is it foolish for me to believe in the way that Christ exhibited his behavior in the land? Because sometimes you hear a lot of different content and it gives you these really good think pieces, things to consider about your belief system. And you might stop and say, that sounds smart. And I'm not sure if I'm dumb. And I have to be honest. Sometimes I think, maybe it is weird that I'm okay with turning the other cheek. Not that I want anybody to actually smack me, but I'm okay with the idea that if you keep going in this circle, that is not going to be good for anyone. And there could be an example of you stopping the madness by practicing some self-control. For some reason, I think that works out. For some reason, I think a soft answer does turn away wrath, where sometimes I feel like I cannot use that soft answer. And when it gets more attention, right? So there are places in my life where the belief system that I have may or may not match up with how it produces in reality. So what I want to do with you all today is I'm going to go through this process with different scenarios that are considered foolishness of God or foolishness of the world. And I really want us to draw a writing assignment out of it at the end, but not before we tally up whether or not we believe that this particular scenario is foolishness or it's wise. So I'm going to go ahead and go through these questions. I want to share with you the prompts that I use for ChatGPT to help support me with today's experience. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, can you give me examples of the stories in the Bible that seem foolish? So People went to God and the response or the request seemed foolish in nature. And then can you also give me examples of what seems like wisdom in the world, but can also be seen as foolishness to God? Now, I went through a few different scenarios. I had to pick out the best ones. I'm not sure if I landed on the best ones, but if you can think in your life of anything that seems foolish in the word or in Christianity or in any religion, I want you to type that down in the chat because I want to explore any other ideas beyond what I shared today. And I also want you to consider if there are things that are in your own domain, in your own belief system or outside of religion that you also think is foolish. So we're really just going through this process of when we think about the foolishness of God, or the foolishness of the world versus the wisdom of God, what does that actually look like? So let's get into today's experience. Here's the first scenario, okay? Get a piece of paper if you want to join, or you can just think in your head, but writing out things are so helpful in life. So maybe you should get a journal real quick. You can pause the video, go get your journal and just write it out because I want you to really write down whether you think this idea or this concept is foolish. So let's look at the first one. It says rejection of humility as weakness. So here's the story. A CEO decides that showing vulnerability to her team may weaken her leadership. She chooses to maintain a strong, authoritative presence instead. So my question to you, does choosing not to show vulnerability strengthen leadership, or does it have other effects? Number 2, healing through spit and mud. So this is coming from the Bible. And this is a story in John chapter 9. Jesus spits on the ground, makes mud, and puts it on a blind man's eye, instructing him to wash in the pool. Afterward, the man regains his sight. So at the surface level, just let me know. Do you think that this is foolishness or you think this is wise? So the question is healing through an unusual method an act of divine creativity, or is it unnecessary? All right, let's go to number 3. Bigger is always better. So this mentality is about the bigger house or even the bigger bottom or the bigger hands or whatever you think is bigger is better. Be honest with yourself. Do you ever adopt this mentality that the more you get, the better? And it could be with different nuances, but just do you think more is better? So here's the story. A wealthy man builds the largest mansion in his town, believing it represents his success. The house becomes the talk of the neighborhood. Does striving for the biggest and best reflect ambition, or does it reveal something else? Okay, so the fourth one is about sacrificial giving. In Mark chapter 12, a widow places her last 2 coins into the temple treasury as an offering. While others give out of their abundance, she gives everything she has. Now, this is an interesting one, because I remember having a conversation with someone about tithes and offering and the fact that people give all of their money to the church even though they cannot live and survive. And as someone who was in an organization that took all of our money, okay, they was taking money and we was in poverty trying to survive, I did notice that something didn't seem right about it, but I also realized that I was always still taken care of and it all worked out. So it's one of these things where, do we play these tricks with our minds in order for us to rationalize certain experiences? Or is there just something about faith that we haven't really captured or understood, making it so it seems like it's unwise? That's just my little take on it. And then going back to the healing through the spit and the mud, I don't know if you all remember this. Maybe if you are into this content, you might have come across it. But there was a pastor who went viral because he put spit on his hands and then he put it on someone's face and their eyes, and everyone was going bananas. They was like, that's crazy, like, ew, that's nasty, why would you do that? And I sat and I thought, like, isn't that something that actually did happen in the Bible? Isn't that something that Jesus actually did? Now, the argument could be, well, he's not Jesus, he can't do that. But what's so interesting is for anyone who actually believes in the Bible and they take the Bible for the full value of the book, and that's just that domain, that personality, that character type, someone who believes in the full Bible, says they believe in the full Bible, and they come across that story, do they believe that he had a case? if he was trying to inspire or he was using this parable, did he have a case to doing so? If we're supposed to do miracles like Christ, or if we're supposed to do the same things that Christ did, or we're supposed to be inspired by his behavior. Are we only supposed to be inspired by the things that seem wholesome or seem, like the right thing to do? Can we not do everything that he did? And that's just a question, not to be not to be like, I can't find a word. So hopefully the sounds work. But it's really to just question, when do we all pick and choose out of our belief systems when to hold up something to be true and when to not?
Yeah, because the vision I'm about to give you, it might get nasty.
And that example could be a stretch, but that's really what came to my mind, where it's like, if I say, or if I am this audience type or this profile, that's the word I was looking for earlier. If my profile fits that I believe in the full volume of the book and I'm not taking anything out of it, and I saw this man do it, is there a case for it, especially if I believe that it was okay that Jesus did it? Like, did Jesus do anything different when he put spit in his hand and then mud in someone's eyes?
Can you just stop talking, like, literally?
And it's really just questions, right? The questions aren't supposed to lead us to dispute or disconnection. I learned through questions, I get to know people a lot better. And so when I have these questions, it's also for myself, like, what do I really believe? Am I just accepting whatever I believe is of the Bible? In some cases, as I still study it, I'm thinking, like, there's a lot of things in here where I have a better understanding of it now that I had these questions. But at one point in time, I can see how, on the surface level, this particular story could lead me astray if I'm looking at it at a surface level, which I believe faith and prayer comes into this experience for those who believe in the Bible. It's something that's a part of the package. If I take the book by itself, I'm going to be able to find all the different ways to rip it apart. But if I'm going off of faith and I'm going off of prayer, that's a different experience. Now, even if I'm outside of a Christian religion or the Bible, I am going to have to depend on some faith and prayer as well. I don't even know. I can't even imagine. Like, I can't even, and I think that's where my limited view is that I can't imagine even living in a world without a faith system.
I was dying earlier today, and then I died. Now I'm dead.
And that's why I'm so curious when people have decided, that they don't have any faith system at all. Like, how do you navigate? Is it all based off of, the knowledge of the world, technology? Like, some people had to have faith in something to believe in anything before it was created, because it was nothing existed. It's almost like, I don't believe anything, nothing existed. So then I had to create it with some type of faith system. I had to use some vision. I had to illustrate. I had to think about it. Before there was a car, there was a horse, but someone said this could be better. With more questions and with more vision, we can make this better. But I don't know. Let's go to the next one. Did I do sacrificial giving? If I did, I'm going to say it one more time. Maybe I just have to cut it out. But in Mark 12, a widow places... Oh, yeah, I did. Okay, let's go to the next one. If it feels good, do it. So this is a philosophy that whenever it feels good, whatever we're following our hearts, just do it. What do you guys think about this scenario? A man spends his weekend pursuing activities he finds enjoyable without worrying about long-term effects. He says he's living life to the fullest. On the surface level, would you title this as foolish with an F or wise with a W? And does prioritizing enjoyment create a fulfilling life, or are there other factors to consider? I don't know, just something to think about. This next one is victory through weakness. So in the story in Judges chapter 7, Gideon leads 300 men into battle against a much larger army after God instructs him to reduce his forces. Despite the odds, they achieve victory. So the question is relying on fewer resources a demonstration of faith and strategy, or is it a risk that could have been avoided? Now, this is interesting to me. It's so interesting to me because when I navigate this idea that I might be a fool for believing in God fully, believe it in the way that Christ behaves. Like that's where I sit. That's where I'm confident at. Where like, yeah, I can do that. That makes sense to me. I believe in loving your neighbor as yourself. I feel like that's going to make it all make sense. Because if we only focus on loving our neighbors as ourselves, would we end up with all these other issues? And loving our neighbor as ourselves has a prerequisite, because how do you learn to love yourself? Because if the way that you see love for yourself is destructive, then that's not going to work out. Because if I love my neighbor as myself and I love myself in a destructive way, then so where do we get that source of love? How do we understand love? Where do we create that vision or idea that I love myself in a way where it's healthy and it's safe for me to love others in the same way? So I adopt these principles because I feel like that's, in a simple nature, that's all we need. But what happens is we create so much chaos and confusion in the world that we need more and more and more resources in order for us to remedy something that was simple. That's a theory. What do you guys think? All right, so this next one says relying on popular opinion. So here's the story. A politician decides to change her position on a key issue to align with the majority opinion to her district. This gains her significant public support. Yo, what y'all think about that? Because that's crazy, right? I always think that we in some way are going to be influenced by what other people think. And we might even say, I don't care what nobody think. Like, I don't even care. But even the way that we like say that suggests that we have some type of care. Like no care at all, you might not even bring the subject up. You would just really live your life fully. It's almost a practice to practice not caring about what other people think, because we know that sometimes we are in our world, sitting in our lives, looking at somebody outside of us, and we're actually caring about them and we're judging them for something that they said, they did, they wear. And even if we adopt this I don't care mentality, in some way we are. So I always think it's interesting when people say nobody cares about you, because I'm pretty sure even if nobody cares about you, they care so much about themselves, or they have these thinking processes they go through in their own head that makes it so they are judging people. I see it. I see people on the road, right? They care enough to put their middle finger up or to yell or to do that with that. They care enough, and they're thinking in their head like, that dummy, they so stupid. And it's even for a simple moment in time. But the care about other people can be positioned where we do care about other people. It's okay to care about what other people think. But the center of that care is, does it work out for the good of us all? Is my care reflecting that I not only care for myself, but I care about all the things around me? Because caring about all the things around me is being able to see that there is a reflection of me based off of how I decide to show up with myself. Even if we're dealing with somebody who's completely not the reflection of us, because some people say you create or you attract who you are. Maybe not so much that you are attracted who you are, but there's an opportunity when you attract something that you're not, when you're not, for you to understand a little bit more about yourself. Like, how do I react in a situation where someone, and for an example of turning the other cheek, wants to, do me harm? How do I show up in the situation? Do I have the self-control and the patience that in the long run just works out in my favor? Or am I quick to battle with that person, and then we both end up in a worse situation, which could be jail or prison of our mindset, right? It doesn't have to always be physically hitting someone. It's just really like when we go tit for tat and we're petty with one another. It's like, I want to get that last word, right? Sometimes it's practicing. Not getting the last word is almost like that hit in the face, right? It's like, all right, you got it. I'm practicing self-control, because I know if I keep going back and forth with you, we might even start to say worse things about one another. And so I'm practicing self-control so I can stop, pause, and say, you know what? It's not worth my investment to keep destroying you with my tongue or allowing you to destroy me with your tongue. So here's where I take a wise stance and stop. Okay. I don't know how we got off the questions, but let's keep going. So are we on that one? Did we just do that one? I forgot. Turning the other cheek, which I just started talked about, is we were on popular opinion. Friends, it's just a game in the making. Okay, so the popular opinion is interesting because the question here is, does following popular opinion reflect adaptability, or are there other factors to weigh? And so what happens is sometimes there's a popular opinion in the world where it's like, we all should be able to adopt this idea. Blank idea. I'm not going to get too intricate. But there's this idea that we all should adopt. And that idea that everyone should adopt, we are putting a certain group in a minority, or we're putting a certain group in jeopardy, or where there's a safety component for a certain group because the majority wants to adopt this opinion. So maybe the opinion is we all should be going to war, right? And it's almost as if, okay, we're all adopting that to be natural and normal things to do. Is even something that we see in the Bible, like, okay, this is an acceptable approach. But what if we all just stopped and thought, like, how does this really help anybody? If we're thinking about it on the very simple level, how does it really help anybody? Is there another route or way? And this is why I want us to use our intelligence, because if we have this emotional intelligence and we really do believe that we're intelligent people, when can we tap into using the intelligence for the well-being of everyone?
I guess you can be intellectually gifted and still be morally bankrupt.
How can we get creative with that versus creative on doing craftiness or wrong to one another? And I don't know the answer. I really think it requires all of us, but I'm just a person who's starting the conversations, okay? Now, this next one, turn the other cheek, which I just talked about. This is in Matthew 5:39. It says, Jesus teaches that if someone strikes you on the cheek, you should turn the other cheek to them as well, rather than retaliating. Now, I know I just pretty much shared my little heart out here, but I want you to honestly share whether you believe that this is wisdom or you think this is foolishness. In choosing non-retaliation, is this an effective way to address conflict, or does it allow others to take advantage? All right, so number 9, everyone is replaceable in work relationships. So a manager operates under the belief that no one in the workplace is irreplaceable, leading her to focus on efficiency and performance metrics rather than individual needs. Does treating people as replaceable create more efficiency, or could it have other consequences? This is the interesting one because I know that there have been layoffs in certain sectors, and when people respond to the layoffs, it's as if they put all of their power and their faith in the CEO and the management. And this is where I say, I don't know how I would be able to navigate the world without a faith system, because if I put my faith in the other people, they would let me down. They may not have the resources. They may think that, productivity is more important, and, I can give them all of my time and my resources, and they could let you go the next day. So having a faith system in that person, that individual, is going to leave us. What is it going to lead us? It's going to leave us with sadness. I can't think of a word. It's just going to lead us with sadness because somebody let us go, and it goes into our self-worth. And so this is why a lot of this understanding of who you are and your self-worth and your faith system and belief system really carries out into the other areas of your life, in my opinion. I don't know how I would operate if I didn't have a faith system or knew myself beyond what other people thought about me. And that doesn't say that I never think about what other people think about me, but if I put most of my stock in what other people thought about me, would I have a return on the investment? I don't think so, but y'all let me know if it works for you. The other case about the work relationship is people who work for someone and they put all of their faith in that person, then they get mad that they can't keep up the business for them. They pretty much look at that CEO and their manager like, why did you do this to me? Why didn't you, carry this out for me? As if things can't go wrong in that person's life who manages. right? They may have not had the wisdom in order to build the company properly. They might not have had the resources to do so. The environment changes, and so they do have to think about, how do I have more money in order to sustain all of the other employees that actually make the business whole. And in some cases, we have scenarios where we think that the CEOs and the managements are greedy and they're just laying people off in order for them to fill their pockets. But if we think about that logically, if people aren't working, then they can't get their pockets fed, right? But maybe it's just an idea of like keeping them poor and making their decisions poor so that they never have that money, which is why it leads to adopting these biblical principles that I'm still learning how to adopt, like stewardship and being able to, reap what we sow, and learning how to operate in our gifts so that we can bring that life abundantly. I think those principles are there. And some people will look at like prosperity preaching, I believe, and they'll say, hey, that's all they care about is money. And I do understand that. But I think when we're honest and we're true and we're living in a world where you do need the money to answer all things, like the Bible says itself, there's just a balance that needs to be created where we can't just pretend that it's all about just, I don't know. Let me not go into that. That's going to be another video. But I do want to talk about this idea of prosperity preaching and just, sacrificing your life and not being able to have money. What does that look like when we actually look at some of the scriptures and break it down, or look at the certain experiences? How does that feed into our thoughts and ideas about how to deal with money and having poor mentalities versus having a wealthy mentality? That is, in my opinion, your wealthy mentality is going to be aligned with the wisdom and the choices that we make. And so even in my personal life, I think, if I did decide to use these principles and I was effective in it and I was honest with myself and I was consistent, would I be somewhere different? Probably, but I really won't know until I actually implement these practices for sure to be able to tell the differences. So I have to practice consistency. I have to practice stewardship. I have to practice counting the costs in order for me to say that it works or it doesn't work. And so now we have the last one, which is healing through obedience. This is in 2 Kings chapter 5. There was a commander with leprosy. He's instructed by the prophet to wash 7 times in the Jordan River to be healed. Initially, he's reluctant. He eventually follows the instruction and is cured. This is one of my favorite ones, and I wanted to make sure it was in this game. So I said, ChatGPT, don't forget this one, because I remember this one. Because what I appreciate about this story is he was expecting something different, because I have leprosy. I don't want to just wash 7 times in the Jordan River. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't seem like it's going to give me any results. So it seems foolish for me to believe that me just washing in the river 7 times is going to give me any results. But here's the thing about faith, and this is why it all starts to like come together, because this, even outside of the Bible, we think about like the fact that there's gravity, and we might be able to explain it all and maybe talk through it all, but we don't really know how it exists. The fact that, nature is planted the way that it is, the way that the animal kingdom is the way that it is, the way that we even developed. We talk about the aftermath, but the beginning of it, we don't really know how that is. So some of these things that seem so foolish, especially when this faith and belief system in something, whether it be the Bible or be God or anything, this faith and belief system is really us curating and practicing believing in something beyond nothing. Because we don't know the root. We don't know how it started. We can make theories. We have been given knowledge and wisdom to make sense of these things. But really, a lot of it could be foolish. Like, it's just depending on how do you define foolish? How do you define wisdom? Or all of it could be wisdom. And the foolishness part is believing that we have the answers when we don't. And it's okay. I don't know. I've been in this place where I have a lot of questions, friends. I like questions. But I'm not necessarily looking for answers anymore all the time. I just like the process of going through those questions and being honest that I have the questions, because through that creative process, I end up in a place where I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I like this world. I like this perspective, but it definitely takes a process of being okay with having that question. And so in this community, I'm thinking, where can I, in this community, I want it to be that questions are okay, because sometimes in a very strict faith system, there is no room for questions. And so you are blindly following, you're blindly following, but you don't really have the heart and the security in that relationship. If I had a relationship with someone and I never had questions for them, or I never had discussions with them about, who they are, where they come from, why they think the way they do, that relationship would seem dull to me. It would seem inauthentic. It wouldn't seem pure. But in a relationship where I'm saying, hey, maybe I don't understand this about you. Can you show me or share with me? I feel like there might be some more quality and depth in that relationship. So in some of these cases where it's like you don't question God, or you got to be in and all, maybe, just like we see in the beginning of Genesis, the relationship is about questions, because we saw that in Genesis, when everything was going down with Adam and Eve, that God had questions. Okay, he had questions. And so if we are made in his image, we're going to have questions. That's just a theory. I want to know what you guys think about today's experience. Tally up at the end. How many did you find to be foolish and how many did you find to be wise? And I know that there's different nuances. So here's what I want you guys to do as far as the writing assignment. Reflect on one of the stories that stood out to you. So if the story stood out to you and you believe that it was foolish, I want you to write out why it was foolish. If you believe it was wise, I want you to write out why it was wise. But I don't want you just to say, I believe this is wise in one sentence. I want you to really get in depth, make this a creative process, and think of the examples or analogies that support your view. Maybe this is personal. Maybe this is even other people's stories. Maybe this is other books or knowledge. Like, why do you believe that this particular concept is foolish or wise? And if today's stories didn't hit, I want you to think about it in general. Is there any time where you think, oh, that could seem foolish or wise to someone, but the opposite to the other? So for example, that might look foolish to me, but I can see why that would be wise to someone. Or that might look wise to me, but I can see why that looks foolish to someone else. Look for those examples and then get creative with the thinking process of why you believe in that foolishness or that wisdom. So that is it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the game. I know I was talking through the game, so it's not like you could just use it and, go through the game with someone, because I'm all like, I just want to tell you my opinions and my emotions, my feelings. But I will practice at getting these games a little bit tightened so you can be able to use this and maybe share it with other people to start those conversations in some of your groups. If you're interested in being in a group where we talk about emotionally healthy relationships, I'm looking for a small group of people who are interested in going through this book with me that I just love about relationships, because I do believe that our relationships with ourselves and the way that we deal with other people is a big part of the equation on having this joyful experience in the earth. Until next time, hold on to you as much as you can. Hold on to your health, your well-being, and your mind. Be mindful.